Welcome back to Mare. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update. If you'd like to support the content and gain access to exclusive features, consider joining my Patreon as well. Loy carefully descended the staircase, trying to move as quietly as possible. He was still dressed in his sister's school uniform, and every step filled him with nervous anticipation. He had hoped to slip back into his room unnoticed, return the clothes, and pretend none of it had ever happened. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. The moment he entered the living room, he froze. His mother was sitting on the couch, her eyes fixed on him. The stern expression on her face immediately told him that she had seen everything. "Loy," she said sharply, "what exactly are you wearing?" His heart nearly stopped. A wave of panic rushed through him as he realized there was no way to explain what she was seeing. I was only trying it on," he muttered weakly. His cheeks burned with embarrassment. His mother slowly stood up. Her expression hardened. "Take it off, right now." Loy swallowed nervously. His hands trembled as he began undoing the buttons on the uniform shirt. Every movement felt painfully slow. He knew he had broken a rule. What he didn't understand was why he had wanted to wear the uniform in the first place. Something about it had fascinated him. Something about stepping into his sister's clothes had awakened feelings he couldn't explain. His mother wasn't interested in explanations. "This behavior is unacceptable," she said firmly. "You are not to wear girls' clothing. Do you understand me?" Loy lowered his head and nodded. Tears gathered in his eyes. Shame washed over him. Yet beneath the humiliation, there was another emotion lurking in the shadows. Curiosity. A strange curiosity that refused to disappear. "Go upstairs and change," his mother ordered. "When your father gets home, we're going to discuss this." Without another word, Loy turned and headed back to his room. His thoughts raced. He knew he was in trouble, but he couldn't stop wondering why wearing those clothes had felt so different. Why had he been drawn to them? Why couldn't he stop thinking about them? As he closed his bedroom door behind him, he had no idea that this moment would become a turning point in his life. Hours later, he sat quietly on the edge of his bed. His mind was still spinning. The more he tried to push the experience away, the more it occupied his thoughts. A sudden knock interrupted his reflection. Before he could answer, his mother entered. The serious look on her face made his stomach tighten. "Loy, we need to talk." He nodded nervously. His throat felt dry. His mother folded her arms. "What happened today was disappointing." Loy stared at the floor. "You chose to wear your sister's clothing. That kind of behavior will not be ignored." Every word seemed to make him shrink further into himself. Then she delivered a punishment he never expected. "If you want to wear girls' clothes so badly," she said coldly, "then that's exactly what you'll wear from now on." Loy looked up in shock. "What?" "You heard me." His mother's expression remained unchanged. "You will no longer wear your usual clothes. Instead, you'll wear your sister's outfits. And while you're in this house, you will be expected to present yourself as a girl." The words hit him like a thunderbolt. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't temporary. This was a punishment. A punishment that would completely alter his daily life. His heart pounded. He wanted to protest. He wanted to argue. But one look at his mother's face told him it would be useless. "Do you understand?" she asked. After a long silence, Loy nodded. He felt trapped, powerless, confused. As his mother left the room, he remained frozen on the bed. Questions filled his mind. What would happen now? How long would this continue? How was he supposed to live like this? Yet despite his fear, another emotion lingered beneath the surface. Curiosity. A curiosity he couldn't explain. Over the following days, Loy's life changed dramatically. Every morning began with a new outfit selected by his mother. Blouses, skirts, dresses, accessories. He was expected to wear them all. One afternoon, he stood in front of his bedroom mirror. For a long moment, he simply stared at his reflection. The person looking back at him barely resembled the boy he remembered. His hair had been carefully styled into soft curls. Light makeup framed his face. A pastel blouse hugged his shoulders. A skirt fell neatly to his knees. High heels elevated his height and challenged his balance. Everything felt unfamiliar. Everything felt strange. He slowly turned from side to side, examining himself. Part of him felt embarrassed. Another part felt strangely intrigued. The conflicting emotions exhausted him. Walking in heels proved difficult. Maintaining proper posture felt awkward. Even sitting down required practice. Every task seemed to come with a new challenge. Later that evening, he opened his dresser drawer. Inside were additional garments his mother had placed there. He hesitated. His hands hovered over the fabric. Then, with a deep breath, he picked them up. He still wasn't sure how to feel. Nothing about this situation made sense. Yet every day seemed to pull him deeper into a world he never expected to experience. Days eventually turned into weeks. The adjustments became slightly easier. The routines became more familiar. But the emotional confusion never disappeared. Then came an even greater challenge. School. The morning he stood at the bus stop wearing his assigned uniform, his nerves were nearly unbearable. He could already imagine the reactions. The questions. The stares. The laughter. As the bus approached, dread settled heavily in his chest. When he stepped aboard, conversations immediately quieted. Students stared openly. Whispers spread through the rows of seats. Loy kept his eyes down and hurried to an empty seat. For a brief moment, he hoped nobody would say anything. He was wrong. The comments began almost immediately. Some students laughed. Others pointed. Several whispered cruel remarks loud enough for him to hear. Each word felt like another weight added to his shoulders. He wished he could disappear. He wished he could escape. Instead, he sat silently and endured it. Throughout the school day, the attention never stopped. Every hallway felt intimidating. Every classroom felt uncomfortable. Every glance seemed filled with judgment. By the time classes ended, he felt emotionally drained. Yet something continued to bother him. Despite the humiliation, despite the embarrassment, despite the fear, there remained a small part of him that couldn't completely reject this experience. That realization frightened him more than anything else. Weeks passed. Loy continued living under his mother's rules. He struggled daily with questions about himself and his future. One moment he felt angry. The next he felt confused. Then curious. Then ashamed. His emotions shifted constantly. He didn't want to be judged. He didn't want to become the target of ridicule. Yet, he couldn't deny that some part of him found the experience fascinating. He hated feeling powerless. He hated being forced into a role he never chose. But he also couldn't ignore the growing questions in his mind. Questions about identity. Questions about expectations. Questions about who he really was. And as those questions grew louder, Loy slowly realized that his journey was only beginning. The challenges ahead would be far greater than anything he had faced so far. The road before him would test his confidence, his courage, and his understanding of himself. Whether he was ready or not, his life was changing. And there was no turning back. Loy often found himself overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Part of him was angry at his mother for forcing such dramatic changes upon him. He resented the lack of choice, the constant pressure, and the feeling that his life was no longer his own. Yet no matter how much he tried to deny it, there were moments when he felt a sense of fascination with the new role he had been pushed into. The experience stirred feelings he couldn't fully explain. There was something about presenting himself differently that captured his attention and challenged everything he thought he knew about himself. The confusion only grew stronger as time passed. One evening, Loy sat alone in his room, staring at the floor while his thoughts raced in circles. He felt trapped between two worlds. One side of him wanted to reject everything that had happened. The other side wanted to understand why these experiences continued to occupy his mind. With a heavy sigh, he rose from his bed and walked toward his dresser. For several moments he stood there silently, staring at the neatly arranged clothing inside. The garments represented everything he had been struggling with over the past few weeks. Slowly, he selected an outfit and changed. When he looked at his reflection, a flood of emotions washed over him. Embarrassment, uncertainty, curiosity, determination. all of them mixed together into something he couldn't easily describe. For weeks he had fought against the situation, constantly questioning himself and his circumstances. Yet standing there in front of the mirror, he began to realize something important. Whether he liked it or not, these experiences had become part of his life. Running from them wasn't providing answers. Understanding them might. That realization marked a turning point. Instead of viewing every change as a punishment, Lloyd decided to approach the situation differently. He would explore his feelings honestly and try to understand himself better. Over the next several days, he experimented with different styles and appearances. He discovered that clothing could be a form of self-expression rather than simply a set of rules imposed upon him. Some outfits made him uncomfortable, while others gave him an unexpected sense of confidence. Each day taught him something new. Some lessons were difficult. Others were surprisingly empowering. Gradually, the fear that had once dominated his thoughts began to fade. In its place grew a sense of self-awareness. Months passed. Life settled into a routine. Lloyd became more comfortable with who he was and less concerned with what others expected him to be. He learned to accept the parts of himself that had once caused confusion and anxiety. For the first time in a long while, he felt a measure of peace. Unfortunately, that peace did not last. As Lloyd grew more confident, his mother's behavior became increasingly controlling. She had always been strict, but her attitude was changing in troubling ways. Small criticisms turned into constant complaints. Simple disagreements became heated arguments. Every day seemed to bring a new conflict. Lloyd found himself walking carefully through the house, afraid that even the smallest mistake would trigger another confrontation. At first, he hoped the tension would eventually disappear. It didn't. Instead, the situation continued to deteriorate. The criticism became harsher. The pressure became greater. The atmosphere inside the home became unbearable. Lloyd felt trapped. He wanted freedom. He wanted independence. Most importantly, he wanted control over his own future. One afternoon, after yet another argument, something inside him finally snapped. He realized he could no longer remain silent. Gathering every ounce of courage he possessed, Lloyd confronted his mother. For the first time, he spoke openly and honestly about his feelings. He explained that he was tired of being controlled, tired of being treated as if his thoughts and opinions didn't matter, tired of living in fear of making someone else angry. His mother reacted exactly as he expected. She was furious. The conversation quickly escalated into a shouting match. Accusations filled the room. Old arguments resurfaced. But unlike before, Lloyd refused to back down. He stood firm. For the first time, he defended himself. The confrontation changed everything. Although he had finally spoken his mind, he knew the conflict was far from over. The following weeks were filled with tension. Lloyd spent countless hours thinking about his future and searching for a way to build a life on his own terms. Then one day an idea began to form. If he truly wanted freedom, he would have to create it for himself. The thought was frightening. Leaving everything behind carried enormous risks. There were no guarantees, no promises of success. But the alternative was continuing to live a life that no longer felt like his own. After careful planning, Lloyd began preparing for the possibility of starting over. He gathered essential belongings, saved what little money he could, considered every obstacle he might face. Each step brought him closer to a decision that would change his life forever. Finally, the moment arrived. Before sunrise, while the house remained silent, Lloyd packed a small bag and stood near the front door. His heart pounded. Fear and excitement battled inside him. He took one last look at the place that had shaped so much of his life. Then he stepped outside. The cool morning air greeted him as he walked away. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of possibility. The future remained uncertain. Challenges undoubtedly lay ahead. But those challenges would be his to face. His choices. His journey. His life. As the first rays of sunlight appeared on the horizon, Lloyd continued forward, determined to discover who he truly wanted to become and what kind of future he would build for himself.